We welcome to the program the Vice President of the United States and somebody who I think has a presidency in his future, J.D. Vance. Welcome to the program, Mr. Vice President.
Glenn, how are we doing?
I'm great. What an amazing few days the president has had. First, with all of the foreign wins before he left, with the wars, and everything that the State Department and Marco Rubio's doing, and now this speech. I think the Riyadh speech is historic on so many levels. How would you describe what's going on in the Middle East this week?
Yeah, so I agree with you, Glenn, about that particular speech. I mean, when I listened to it, and I obviously knew a little bit about what the president was going to say, it changed a little bit, I would say, over the last couple of days. But the core message is very simple, that America wants not to remake the world in America's image. We don't want to force our allies to adopt our exact form of government. We actually want to be in the business of shared interest and shared economic cooperation. And so long as you're not trying to kill anybody, and so long as you're interested in building wealth for your citizens and working with America, then America's open for business. And I think that's a very important signal to send to the world. You know, the Obama administration economist Larry Summers had a very smart point a few years ago. He said, when the Chinese show up in the developing world, they show up with a bag of money. When Americans show up in the developing world, they show up with a lecture. And if you're, given a choice between a lecture and a bag of money, you're going to choose the bag of money every step of the way. I think what the president is saying is that era of American preachiness and America telling other countries how to live their lives, that era is over. And I think it's a very important point for the Middle East. It's a very important point for the whole globe. And, in some ways, only President Trump could have made that argument at this point in time.
Are we stopping with the bags of money, too?
I think we're stopping with both, but we are really looking at economic cooperation. In Africa, for example, Glenn, you have American diplomats sent by the Biden administration who are telling very conservative Christian African countries that they need to fly the LGBTQ flag,
right.
But they're not engaging in any economic arrangement where, the Africans have critical minerals that we need. They have other industries that we could be participating in, we could be partnering on. And I think that's the bags of money point. It's not that we're going to give them money, but that we could have some shared economic relations with a conservative African country where we wouldn't want to tell them how to live their lives. We would actually just want to enter into a partnership with them. And that's, again, a big, big change. It's a big shift, but it's an important shift from a very dumb American foreign policy to a very smart one that I think is going to benefit this country for the next generation.
I had horrible pain in my hands. I had a hard time moving them. I could barely work with them. I couldn't write or type or anything. I tried everything. Then I found Relief Factor. Relief Factor is a 100% drug-free supplement developed by doctors, and it's safe to take daily. It made a real impact for me and so many others. Try their 3-week quick start now, $19.95 at relieffactor.com. There was this old TV show, it was a game show when I was a kid called the $20,000 Pyramid, and they would allow you to say pass, and you could skip the subject of the question. And I give you that. We're playing the $20,000 Pyramid here. I look at the reaction of your speech in Europe. Then I see the moves that they're making. I see the new Prime Minister of Canada, who was the architect of the Glasgow Financial Accords. And I'm not sure that we're on the same page anymore. We can be friends with everybody, but I'm not sure we're walking down the same path anymore with those countries.
Well, it worries me, Glenn, because, look, there are certainly some economic benefits and friendships that we can have with a lot of our, sort of Western European and obviously our Canadian friends. But in Western Europe in particular, my view on this, Glenn, is our relationship with Western Europe is always going to be unique. America, of course, started as an English colony. We're always going to have a special relationship with the United Kingdom. But what that means fundamentally is that if we see certain Western European countries, in Germany, for example, where we have 38,000 troops, if we see Germans doing something that is incredibly offensive to America's values, I think Americans are going to recoil a little bit at that. And, I went to Germany very recently, very briefly, Glenn, just to, visit the troops and say hello. And I was hearing from Germans, even during that very brief visit on the ground, things that they were worried about free speech policies in their own country. Well, if we've got 38,000 troops there and we're living amongst the Germans, we're literally defending their country, I think you can expect Americans to at least express some negative opinions about some of the free speech policies they're seeing in Europe. And Glenn, you know this as well as anybody, things that start in Europe sometimes come over to America in the same way that things that start in America sometimes make their way to Europe. The kind of social media censorship that we've seen in Western Europe, it will in some ways already has made its way to the United States. That was the story of the Biden administration, silencing people on social media. So we're going to be very protective of American interests when it comes to things like social media regulation. We want to promote free speech. We don't want our European friends telling social media companies that they have to silence Christians or silence conservatives. Right. And I think there is going to be that friction over the next 10 years. It's not that we're not friends, but there are going to be some disagreements you didn't see 10 years ago.
So, they have decided they're not going to pursue being a leader in AI, but they're going to make all the rules. How confident are you that we are in a winning position here on AI? It is advancing so rapidly, and the things I hear that come out of China, it's either they're way behind, it's all a paper tiger, or they're way ahead. Where are we, do you think, on AI and AGI?
Well, I think that we're ahead, Glenn, but nobody who says that we're way ahead should be believed. In artificial intelligence, 6 months is a lifetime. 12 months is a generation. We're probably 12 months, maybe 2 years ahead of where the Chinese are when it comes to critical hardware, when it comes to the necessary infrastructure, when it comes to the engineering talent. But that is not very far ahead at all. And we're really going to have to invest a lot in developing America's next generation of scientists. Glenn, we're going to have to make sure that our hardware companies, that we stop regulating them to death, that our energy infrastructure, that we stop regulating it to death. Because if we allow the Chinese to catch up, we may never, ever have an edge on China in this space again. And I think a lot of people, artificial intelligence, it's a chat bot. It's something that maybe helps a college student write a paper. No. The artificial intelligence that I'm worried about, Glenn, is the kind of intelligence that helps them develop next generation weapons, that helps their rockets and missiles hit their target 99% more accurate than the weapons that aren't using artificial intelligence. There are just massive defense technology implications of this, that it's kind of like, what would have happened if the English army had fought the Americans in the Revolutionary War and we had M16s and they had muskets. We don't want to meet on a battlefield of the future and have, we have the muskets and the Chinese have the M16s. I think AI is a critical part of staying ahead of the communist Chinese. And it's something, look, we're very focused on. We've got a great guy in David Sachs of the administration who's leading this effort, but it's full pedal to the metal, Glenn. We have to constantly be innovating and staying ahead of the game. We can't follow the European lead of regulating. We want America to innovate, and that's what we're going to keep doing.
I spoke to the president a couple of weeks ago, and he, I was going to ask him about nuclear energy, and he just volunteered. I said, what about energy with AI? And we went into saying, we're talking about making them their own utilities. They can build it. We're going to clear, even if they want to make nuclear power plants. That didn't print. I mean, I thought that was one of the bigger headlines of my lifetime, and nobody seemed to pick that up or care about that. And we do lose if we don't have these power plants. What are we doing to accelerate? I mean, they need 99% of our power by 2028. 99% of the power that's currently being made. We need power plants.
Yeah, you're a smart guy, Glenn, because I don't know what else the president said during that interview, but I doubt it was as important as that point. Because
nothing.
This is a critical issue, and you ask what we've done. We've had Lee Zeldin at the EPA and all of our environmental folks look at how we cut through the red tape and make it possible, because the market would do this, right? These companies would like to do this, but it's the environmental bureaucrats that have told them you can't really attach a power plant off grid to a pure, artificial intelligence hardware facility. We're tearing down those regulations and making it possible again. And then, of course, Glenn, part of this is not just building these facilities, but is powering them with the fuel that we need. And the president, you hear this term, all of the above. The president has really said we're in all of the above. Like, we're reducing regulations on coal. We're empowering the natural gas folks, petroleum, obviously nuclear. Like, this is a president who said all power that we have, we need to put into this this prospect. And Glenn, one more important point on this. If you look at a chart of electricity generation, the People's Republic of China versus the United States, 20 years ago, we blew them out of the water. Right now, the PRC is producing about 3 times as much electricity as we are, and we flatlined over the last 20 years. That's innovation, that's development, that's got to change, Glenn. We have got to be producing more power for the next wave of innovation. It's maybe the most important part of the puzzle.
So I did a show last night on just that a reset is coming. It's inevitable that a reset is coming, and we have to hurry, cut the budget, onshore, fix the tariff or the trade deficit, or we don't really have a chance of doing anything. And as I was looking at, we ran 3 different models through AI, and they all came back with the same stuff. And we're doing those. The president is doing those things, except for the cutting of the budget. I mean, Congress won't even pass the DOGE cuts. When will the White House become strong on you must cut the spending?
Yeah, great question, Glenn. And I will say the big, beautiful bill text just came out last week. That's going to change a lot from now until then. We've already had conversations with House leadership that we want to see some more significant efforts to rein in spending here. The president also believes, Glenn, and I think he's right about that if you cut the trade deficit or you raise revenue through tariffs, that you actually go a long way to making the country on a more sustainable fiscal pathway as well. But you're right, you can't do it without cutting domestic spending. Right. We're going to have to do it and get serious about it.
I mean, I think
we're making that as clear to congressional leaders as possible. But look, I knock on wood here, but I think that once we get the final package out of the House and the Senate, we're going to have something that's serious on budget cutting. And there's one final point on this, Glenn. What no one talks enough about, and where when I talk to Elon, I talk to the Doge folks, where they think they're going to get the most cuts is in taking people, illegal aliens, and other people who are defrauding the Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security system. Like, you think about 2 people, right? A guy who's paid into Social Security for 40 years. Obviously, we want that guy to get his Social Security benefits. You compare that person to an illegal alien who's engaged in Medicaid fraud. Obviously, we don't want that person to get their benefits. I think Democrats are going to fight us on this, but this is such an important point. We cannot allow people to defraud the Medicare and Medicaid system, or it's going to bankrupt this country. It's also just fundamentally unfair. I don't want people who shouldn't even be here to be on the public dole.
Right. I know you're headed over to the Vatican. You're going to be celebrating the inaugural Mass of Pope Leo this weekend, along with Senator Rubio, who's also Catholic. You had one of the last conversations with the last Pope. Why does the Pope matter so much to the world? And I want to talk beyond faith and religion. Why is he so important?
Well, obviously, right, he is the leader of 1.4 billion Catholics, and so there is just a lot of soft influence, right? He doesn't have a military, he doesn't have an army, but he does have a lot of influence through those Catholics. And, a lot of those Catholics, I think we won a majority of Catholics in the last election, but a lot of those Catholics continue to vote Democratic. And so, there is just a natural influence in having the ear of 1.4 billion faithful people, including, 100 million or so in the United States. I also think, Glenn, something I've picked up on, and you don't see a lot of headlines about this, but the Vatican has already played a very constructive role in some of the peace conversations that we've been having all over the world. They've been trying to facilitate negotiations between the Russians and the Ukrainians. They've been trying to facilitate other peaceful negotiations between various countries. And so, they have that soft power, right? They have the ear of those Catholics, but then they also have an ability to use that soft power to play a mediating role in some of these disputes. So, while the Pope doesn't have an F-35 standing behind him, he does have the prayers of a lot of faithful Catholics, and that matters when you try to insert yourself into these conversations. So we welcome that engagement. As you know, the president really does believe that we can have less conflict in the world if we just have cooler heads prevail. So, we welcome that engagement, and we'll continue to do so over the next few years.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vice President, for all you do. If you don't know why he picked Leo as his name, you in particular will be fascinated by it. You'll have to ask him because you'll love the reason why he did. Have a safe trip. Thank you for everything that you've done, and Godspeed.
Thanks, Glenn. Take care, man.
Bye.